My neighbor caught me glancing her way. Her next words stayed with me forever the morning. I almost packed my life into 2 cardboard boxes and drove away from Cedar Ridge Apartments in Asheville, North Carolina. My neighbor looked straight at me through the open window. I quickly looked away, embarrassed that she had caught me staring again. I thought she would close the curtains or pretend I wasn't there. Instead, she smiled with tired eyes, leaned a little closer, and said something so unexpected that it stayed with me for the rest of my life. Before we continue, if you believe kindness, hope, forgiveness, compassion, and second chances can change someone's life, please take a moment to like this video, share it with someone who needs encouragement, leave a comment, and subscribe to the channel. Your support helps us continue sharing stories that remind people they are never truly alone. My name is Nathan, and 2 years earlier I had arrived in Asheville with a new teaching job, convinced I was beginning the happiest chapter of my life. Instead, the school budget was cut. My position disappeared within months, and after a string of temporary jobs, I found myself barely able to pay rent. Pride became my biggest burden. I smiled at everyone in the hallway while quietly skipping meals to save money. My parents had passed away years before, and my younger sister Rachel lived across the country with her own growing family. Calling for help never felt like an option. Across the courtyard lived Grace, a woman around my age who always watered the flowers on her balcony before leaving for work. She greeted everyone with gentle kindness, yet there was a sadness behind her smile that never seemed to disappear. Every afternoon she returned carrying grocery bags, and every evening, warm light glowed from her apartment long after everyone else had gone to sleep. I often wondered what kind of life she lived behind those windows, but I reminded myself that neighbors deserved privacy. Even so, our quiet routines crossed almost every day. One Saturday morning, while I was calculating whether I could afford another month of rent, I glanced toward her balcony. That was when she noticed me. Instead of looking uncomfortable, she simply smiled and quietly said that sometimes she looked across at my apartment too, because seeing another light on reminded her she wasn't the only person trying to make it through difficult days. Those words stopped time. I had believed I was invisible in my struggle, but somehow another lonely heart had recognized mine without either of us saying a thing. Over the following weeks, small moments replaced awkward silence. We waved in passing. Sometimes we carried each other's groceries upstairs. Other evenings we simply sat on opposite balconies, watching the sunset paint the Blue Ridge Mountains in shades of gold and purple. We never rushed conversations. Somehow, those peaceful silences became more comforting than anything I had experienced in years. Eventually, Grace shared that her husband, Michael, had passed away after a sudden illness 3 years earlier. The apartment had once been full of laughter, music, and plans for a family that never came. Since then, she had buried herself in work because returning to an empty home every evening hurt less than thinking about what had been lost. She admitted that seeing me quietly reading on my balcony each evening reminded her that life still moved forward, even when grief tried to convince people otherwise. Listening to her story changed something inside me. My own problems suddenly felt different. They were still real, but no longer impossible. I stopped measuring my worth by my paycheck and began remembering why I had become a teacher in the first place. I volunteered at a local community center, helping children with reading after school. The work wasn't glamorous, but every smile reminded me that purpose often arrives long before success. Months later, the principal of a nearby elementary school visited the community center. She watched one of my reading sessions and later offered me a permanent teaching position. For the first time in what felt like forever, I drove home with tears of gratitude instead of worry. When I told Grace the news, her eyes filled with happiness that felt completely genuine, as though my victory belonged to both of us. Life slowly transformed. I began helping Grace restore the neglected community garden behind the apartment complex. Neighbors who had barely spoken before started planting vegetables and flowers together. Elderly residents shared gardening tips with young families. Children laughed between rows of tomatoes and sunflowers. A place that had once felt like a collection of strangers slowly became a real neighborhood. The greatest lesson came one crisp autumn evening. Grace admitted she had almost moved away the week she first spoke to me. She believed nothing good remained in that apartment after losing Michael, but one simple glance between two lonely neighbors had reminded her that hope often begins with the smallest connection. Sometimes people aren't searching for someone to rescue them. They're simply hoping someone notices they exist. If this story has touched your heart so far, please take a moment to like this video, subscribe, and share it with someone who may need a reminder that kindness often begins with the smallest gesture. Your support allows these uplifting stories to reach people who may be feeling alone today. Before we reach the end, I'd love to hear from you. Please leave a comment telling us about a small act of kindness that changed your life, or one simple moment you'll never forget. Your story could inspire someone reading through the comments today. Looking back, I realized that Grace never gave me money, solved my problems, or magically changed my circumstances. What she gave me was something far more valuable. She reminded me that every person carries battles no one else can see, and sometimes the greatest gift we can offer is simply letting another person know they are seen. Every time I walk past that apartment building, I remember the words she spoke after catching me glancing her way. They taught me that hope doesn't always arrive with loud miracles. Sometimes it quietly appears through an open window, carried by the voice of a neighbor who understands loneliness just as deeply as you do. And sometimes, that is enough to change a life forever.